Hi, everyone. I'm Usha, your podcast host. Welcome to Optimized for Humans, where we explore what AI adoption looks like in real time, speaking with leaders who are living this day in and day out. Today, I'm speaking with Oscar Chavarria. Oscar, welcome to the show. I'd love to start by asking you to introduce yourself and what excites you about this topic.
Asha, thank you for having me. I am Oscar Chavarria. I am an operator engineer who happened to have worked in both textiles, healthcare, and then back into textiles. What excites me about this topic is I believe we are living through a very disruptive time in a technology that is rapidly evolving. When I say rapidly evolving, it is something that what a tool cannot do this week, next week it can actually do it, or what used to be things that would not be possible now are possible, and they're rapidly evolving. So it excites me because it's kind of like the last, what I feel, the last technology that I will be able to actually see before I retire. I mean, I'm still far from retirement, but it kind of feels really, really exciting.
Yeah, this is definitely a very big one for sure. I'd love to just kind of start by asking you, how are you using AI personally as a leader beyond the basics? I know we spoke about this a little, and I'd love to um, have you give us a bit of an overview about how you're thinking about AI and how you're using it.
Yeah, I think that for me is it goes beyond just using it as a tool, and it's using it as a system. So it's learning how to use it to think better, to decide better, to lead with more information that you were able to have. It's helping you harness or tap into your curiosity. And it's not about doing the work, is just about asking it to give you better questions. But you could also say
Mm,
sometimes it could give you an answer and it could be very, very convincing because it could also hallucinate. But it's asking the probing questions in terms of, what do you think about this? But then give me the pros and cons, or give me a counter view. Give me something that I can believe on, and then give me the counter. And when you see both, it helps you get 2 points of view, and you still have to be inside of the as the judgment, or you still have to be the human in the loop making the call. So
mhm.
it helps with the mundane tasks, but and it helps you get to information in a faster manner.
Yeah, I really like the piece around like leveraging it to actually help you think rather than just asking it to point you in this way or that, because we have to be careful about the whole AI sycophancy piece where it's going to tell you, it usually has a pretty good sense of where you're leaning, and it's going to like lean into that and give you evidence of how you're right and how you're thinking about it so well and so critically. So I really love that you're actually leveraging it to probe you and your thinking and ask you questions to actually help uncover a perspective and challenge your perspective rather than just affirm your sort of existing point of view.
Yeah, and I think that this is where I believe that you have to treat the machine. I normally call it the machine, but I'm referring to, anytime I say machine, I'm just referring to an AI or an LLM model. The thing that I have
I like
learned
it.
is it's a tool. You have to convert it from that tool into a system, and that
Yeah.
means that you have to maybe insert the instructions. Sometimes it would actually say, "Oh, I
Mhm.
agree. That's a great idea." For instance, on all of my LLMs, I have a general system instruction that says, first principles first, use logic and only logic, ensure that you are pushing back on what I am believing, and give me, do
Mhm.
not make things up, support it with data or support it with statistics so that I can rely on the machine. And that was something that in the past, when I first started using it, and I've evolved from chat to Notebook to Gemini to Claude to I've used now all five of them, but it is important
Mhm.
to ensure that you have that system instructions. But I even have in Claude, for instance, I have skills that would be like red team this. Here's what I'm actually writing, or
Mhm.
here's how I'm thinking about something. I want you to red team it, and that red team is essentially pulling everything apart where it makes sense, where
Nice.
it doesn't. And it's important because it can write in a very convincing way, which is kind of like if you ever, I don't know, the closest analog that I would find to this is if you tune into the news on one channel versus another channel,
Mm,
you start leaning one way or the other
yeah.
because they somehow curate the news or give the news, even though it should be impartial. There is some leaning towards one end or one party or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. And I really, one of the things that I think it's really useful for is actually that like red team um, analogy that you mentioned of just like leveraging it to give you feedback on your thinking and on your ideas, because it actually does a really good job, I think, of lending a critical eye when you've actually created something, and it's an objective thing, so it feels less personal as well. And one of the things I always like to do is have it go through and give me feedback from the lens of like whoever the end user or customer is that I'm designing it for. And I think that's a really meaningful way actually to get past some of the sycophancy and like confirmation bias that I think is just one of the risks we have to always be mindful of with the machine. I really like that
Yep.
you call it the machine, by the way. Yeah. I'm curious how you're using it with your teams and how that experience has been, and how sort of how have your teams embraced the machine, and how have your teams maybe had some resistance around the machine, and how have you dealt with that as a leader?
So I would probably say I could give you a couple use cases of how I'm using it and how we have started using it inside of the team. We started with simple things like summarizing the meeting, summarizing the highlights of the meeting, ensuring
Hmm.
that you are doing your analysis and say instead of typing, now you're pushing down the typing and of the creating of that report or that weekly report, and then you're utilizing that, you're inverting it, and you're saying 80% now can be utilized to read through the analysis, read through the data, but you're no longer having to type and having to amass the information. You can dump a report and it will provide a sketched out or a templated analysis. And now I'm spending more time doing the judgment using the intel. You could do synthetic personas, for instance, whether it's a board or it's a coach. I think we have loaded transcripts of our calls, and that allows you to understand that every human receives a message and it processes that message through their paradigms and
Hmm.
experiences. The machine doesn't do that. The machine somehow will list out, whether you like it or not, the things that are being said and the things that are not being said. Or you could also say,
Hmm.
read through this
Yeah.
transcript. Tell me what are the things that were being said, but then now go in and think of what are those things that are not being said, or how do they connect back to their last annual report, or if you had done a research on the company, connected back to what were the things that are resonating between the transcript and the research that we had done on the company. So we could also go back and create a feedback loop to improve the reasoning. Now, pushback is definitely there. Particularly, I think when people feel that this is where the confirmation bias comes. If you are looking for reasons to not use it, you will probably find whether it's on your social media or your news or your whatever you're using, because at the end of the day, the machine is always listening to you. It's sometimes what I feel because you start talking about AI, I'm sure that I'm going to get a lot of AI post on my either LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. But they start saying, well, but it lies or hallucinates, or it
Yeah, yeah.
basically it only agrees with you. They didn't stop somebody from, I don't know, hurting themselves. I think the latest one somebody sent me yesterday was Cloud deleted a database, and it basically admitted to it, and it was very rude in terms of how it was done. And I think it's all goes back to fear being replaced. Am I
Mm,
training the machine to take my job? And what I have done is ensure that they know that, just like computers 40 years ago, the computers have not replaced the human beings. What the computers have allowed us to do is to do more, to invent new
right.
roles, to invent new tasks, to look at the business in different ways. So the same thing will happen with AI. The machine can help you do your job better, and starting with smaller things that will free up their time, right? We all have a
Hmm.
list of things that we don't have time to do, or that drains our energy when we have to go ahead and do them, whether it's an email that you have to start from a blank slate, or a proposal that you're having to go back and edit multiple different times, and it feels not counterproductive. It feels slow, like you're having to edit the name of the company, the address, all of that stuff can be on a context. You have already a template, and it
Hmm.
already does it for you. And you could do that with a merge document, I guess, on in Word. But the machine is capable of
Hmm.
adding a little bit more intel or a little bit more context to your documents. But it's rational. That resistance is going to be there, and it's up to the
Yeah.
leader to model the behavior, and it's up to the leader to also show how are ways where we can do the work. I'll give you a quick example. We used to do market
Sure.
research, and that market research would normally start from, we would understand what the product was, what the market, what the customer segments, what were the samples of the product, and then we would need to understand what was the overall market, what was the size of the market, the competitors, what were people raving about, what were people complaining about, and all of that would take easily a team of 4 or 6 different individuals weeks to go ahead and compile. You can go ahead and now create a workflow that is comprised of, say,
Hmm.
multiple different prompts. Every one of those prompts could also be fine tuned with the machine. And you
Hmm.
could now have, I want to actually learn about athleisure on the US market, on for women or even for men. And I want to go ahead and focus on just outerwear within athleisure. The machine will be able to output a report that normally would have taken 6 or weeks, 6 hours or weeks, and you can get
Yeah.
that in less than 10, 15 minutes. So now you are using, if you still have that time, right? What are you using it for? You're using it to comb through a curated report that before you would have actually used 80% of your time to amass everything and to put it nicely in a report. Now the machine is doing that. So you're inverting it. Now you're using 80% of the time to analyze, where is the
Yeah.
market? Who are the competitors? How is the market moving? What are people raving or not? So to me, it's utilizing your time or inverting it.
Yeah, there's some very specific superpowers that it definitely has, that I think like that's sort of the what are the things where it takes you 2 months and now it takes you a few hours with this tool. And I really like the emphasis on that. And I appreciate the points you made too around the fear piece. And I do think that there are a lot of organizations and leaders right now who are stuck in this position of being pushed on this cost efficiency um, question, and also, you know, trying to figure out how do they invest in the technology with the resources they have available. And a lot of that is often, I think, coming down to a reduction in headcount. So I do understand the fear and where people are coming from. And I think it's also a moment in time for leaders to take a stance, you know, and really work out what is a purpose and people driven way to enable this change. And that's not about absolutes around no headcount reduction or yes headcount reduction, etc. But there is something to be said about how do you lead with people in mind and in the center, and how do you work with that. And I think, as you said, it does come down to how you as a leader show up in this moment.
One thing that I was thinking as you were talking, Asha, one thing that I've used, I'm an operator engineer. I've worked in manufacturing and supply chain for at least 2/3 of my career.
Hmm.
Um, and I was fortunate enough to work in a lean manufacturing environment. And that lean
Hmm.
manufacturing environment was all about continuous improvement. It was all about troubleshooting. It was
Yeah.
passing the information as to how do you do continuous improvement, but you're training your employees to do a 5 why exercise, finding a root cause, troubleshooting
Hmm.
a problem within the line. And the role of the engineer turns
Yeah.
from the creator of all the ideas to the facilitator of ideas, because now you're empowering the people who are doing the work day in and day out to be able to bring
Yeah.
continuous improvement onto the table. I equate that and I use
Yeah.
that a lot in terms of every time you're creating a continuous improvement, you
Yeah.
should not, or you should be either upfront that this is going to create some reduction in force, or you could also think proactively and say, if you have capable
Hmm.
individuals, let's say you're dealing with knowledge workers, if you have capable individuals and you free up their time and you have
Yeah.
to create layoffs, that means that you don't have a good pool or a good backlog of ideas that you have never had time to implement. And I don't think that I have ever
Yeah.
seen any company that can actually say, well, we don't have any more ideas to work on, or we have plenty time.
Yeah.
We basically complete our work in the 40 hours that we have allotted. We always have opportunities for improvement. So for me, I also say, whatever you're doing, whatever you're freeing up with in terms of time, what are you utilizing it for? It could be that you've always thought
Yeah.
about connecting several things into a system, and now you're capable of doing that and tinkering with it because you now have the time, because you have outsourced some of that mundane task. If you go after,
Hmm.
in my book, I have like the energy audit. Find out what are the things that
Hmm.
generate energy or create energy for you as a person. What are the things that deplete energy from you as a person? And then what are the things that are low value and what are
Yeah.
the things that are high value? When you look at that, you normally people feel or optimize for the things that give them energy. That's just one way to increase
Yeah.
the energy ratio. But the reality is, if you start focusing on the things that are depleting your energy, the amount of energy that you
Yeah.
start creating is superb. So I feel
Yeah.
that a lot of times what I do with my teams is, let's ensure that we are carving out the time so that we're getting time back to work on the things that really um, energize us. And that sometimes could be running the analysis, doing a little bit more experimentation with the numbers that typically you would not have because you were amassing the numbers or taking it out from one system and putting it into another system. So I feel like that is super important. Now, there is a reality, and I believe that candor is important when you're as a leader, that you're talking about, yes, there will be
Hmm.
things that will be exposed, and what we need to understand is, if you have a bad process, the machine is just going to create the errors much quicker, right?
Hmm.
So that is a concern that we always go back to first principles. Let's fix the process first and then automate. So, or eliminate what needs to be eliminated. But understanding or having people buying in to the tool is important. And for me, it's also talking about the things that are going to be inevitable um,
Yeah.
up front.
Yeah, IKEA actually had a great example of exactly that. They automated a whole bunch of customer, like call center inquiries and whatnot, and redeployed a whole bunch of people towards interior design, something that they've wanted to do for a long time and hadn't had the chance to do it yet. And I believe they were very successful with that. And spinning up that new idea and business actually had um, significant increase in their profit margin as a result of that. So again, I think every company will have some version of that. I think, and the individuals
Yeah,
who are closest to the work often have ideas of other things you can do to have the impact that you're trying to do. So I think there's a lot of meaning in that.
I agree with you. We all companies have something that they would like to go ahead and work on, but they just don't have time. And the answer sometimes is not hiring more people. That's also what AI allows
Right.
you to do. You're able to carve out time of your trained people that have the insight, that have the context of the company, that have that tribal knowledge, start transferring some of that tribal knowledge, but you're not trying to transfer the tribal knowledge because you want the machine to do the work. You're utilizing the human for what the human only can do, and that is bringing the experiences, the feeling,
Yeah.
the emotion, the judgment that cannot be codified inside of the machine.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. And how do you do that inside of sort of larger, more bureaucratic organizations? What have you found in your own experience, and what are you hearing from others around that?
I think that the biggest roadblock on bigger enterprises is the governance, but it
Mm,
is a large roadblock or wall for a reason, because when you are outputting something through AI, you still are responsible. It's kind of like when you're delegating a task. You might delegate a task to your subordinate or to somebody in your team. You're still responsible for the outcome of that task,
mhm.
right? Even though somebody else did it, as the leader, you are still responsible, even though you delegated a task to somebody else. The same thing applies to AI, right? AI can, that governance is meant to protect, where you're not sharing sensible information, you're not sharing secrets, you're not sharing because you don't own the information. It goes into the machine and you're utilizing the
Yeah.
data, or the machine is actually utilizing the data to train and to learn itself to provide better value for other people. So you need to just be aware of that. So that governance is probably one big roadblock, but it's there for a reason. What we
Hmm.
have typically done, or what I have seen other people doing, is start with smart or small pain points, things that are dragging on, whether it's a report or an action item,
Yeah.
or it is pulling the report from the system to extract a couple of cells. That could be automated. So instead of you pulling the report, you have the bot go in, run the report, dump it into your email. Then that triggers another task that actually takes the cells that you want to go ahead and do, dump it onto your report, create the insights, and now you're basically eliminating three steps just into one. And
Hmm.
all of us in the knowledge space have tasks that are associated or that dragged our energy down. So to me, it's start with those pain points, small and safe experiments, like summarizing. And as you start
Yeah.
seeing, it's like you start small, but then you start going up. Training is important, understanding how the machine works, but also the data confidentiality, what tools are approved to be used and why. And then even though sometimes somebody might actually say, I'll give you an example for our company. Claude is phenomenal when it comes to writing. Um, Copilot may not be so much, right? So somebody might
Right.
actually say,
Yeah.
well, I don't
Yeah.
want to use Copilot. Copilot actually doesn't give me the essay or the report in the way that I want it. It's basically gibberish, or it just writes in a way that I don't necessarily like. Try to find what is Copilot good at? Well, Copilot, if you use it in the enterprise, it has access to all your files. So you don't have to have been
Right.
here. And if you want to go ahead and say, what do you know about product X or Y within the company? It will be able to go out there into the files that he has access to, and retrieve all the information, whether it's PowerPoints, Excel spreadsheets, reports
Yeah.
on a specific topic
Yeah.
that no other LLM is going to be able to do, because Copilot has the context that you normally would need. So, if anything, if you're running or wanting to go ahead and do a prompt where you have to front load all of the context that you would need to front load to be able to extract a good piece of information, you don't need to do that in Copilot. So it's finding the things that work inside of the organization, but training, again, it's a super important
Yeah.
piece that I can't stress enough.
Yeah, and part of that I think is like everyone kind of familiarizing themselves and just like building a relationship with the tools on some level of like what works for you, which model works best for what, all of that I think is a discovery. Interesting tangent. Claude is now powering Copilot, so I'm curious if that
Yes.
changes things or not. I am not a Copilot user, so I can't confirm or deny, but I would be
Oh, it is. I
curious
can
to see if
confirm
that
it.
changes things.
I can confirm it. So what they have done is they still are powered by both. So Copilot,
Ah, I
you
see.
can go ahead and
Get
set
a
it
little
up on
mix.
auto, or you can actually say, I want the
Yeah.
answer to be ChatGPT, or I want the answer to be Claude. So
Oh,
you can
nice.
choose, you can leave it on auto, or you can actually choose. The
Yeah,
company has to enable both of the two models, because
sure.
again, I believe every LLM has certain things that they're just excel at. I don't think that
Yeah,
I started with just one. Now I pay for all five, and I'm a free kind of guy, person, or a free kind of guy. Like, I love free. I don't like to paying for tools. And now I pay, 2 years in, and I'm paying for all
yeah,
of the different tools because they all have something that they're really, really,
yeah.
really good at that the
Special
others are
skills.
not good at.
Yeah, I that definitely resonates for me in my experience as well, for sure. Well, Oscar, what I heard from you, well, I guess I'd just open it to you. What's one piece of advice you would share for leaders? I heard you say, just start small with something, small experiments. Is there anything else you would add? One piece of advice for leaders in terms of where they start.
I think is I actually had prepared something for it. I'm trying to actually formulate it correctly. For me, is start with your personal productivity. Start with your own
Yeah,
things
nice.
that normally you drag, whether it's a Monday report, or whether it's scanning the news, or whether it's understanding or doing the research on a company. Things that you know that you
Yeah.
have to do, but every time you have to do it, it's like, I don't know, list out anything that you procrastinate on. You know that they drag your
Hmm.
energy. That's why you procrastinate them, right? So personal productivity is where I would
Yeah.
start first. Then, as you get more and more familiar with the tools, you start moving and evolving to your teams, right? How can this
Yeah.
create a better outcome for the overall team? And that could be tasks that are normally, whether it could be meeting notes. Every one of our meeting notes now goes through the AI, and AI goes through and creates the different tasks, and it loads it into the planner. Planner now actually manages the overall task. So we're the hybrid of using the machine and using the tools that are available is important. I think you then can move into department use cases. So let's imagine that you are
Yeah.
a cross-functional department that is managing supply chain and is managing quality and is managing the customs side, and you're having to triangulate all of this through email. Well, you can go ahead and have everything be sent to a repository. That repository now creates a overarching report that nobody had to piece together from 10 or 20 different emails. So department use cases, I think, are important. Cross-functional,
Yeah.
operating systems. So to me, I evolved from just a tool to now treat it as a system. So, and treating it as a system can be as simple as you have three prompts, right? So instead of building one major prompt, you basically start big, do the research. Now you're basically curating to the salient points. Now you're curating to your internal senior leadership team, your team report, and your board paper. The same process, but you tiered it into three different workflows or three different prompts that you daisy chained. Um, and then I
Hmm.
think the ultimate goal would be to have an overall enterprise transformation. I think we're
Yeah,
long ways for that, at least for us, because I think that one piece that is super, super important that I did not mention before, um, it cannot be, you have to have the human in the loop. And the human in the loop is
yeah,
more of an upstream process. So if you have the human in the loop as the last step of the workflow, you're
yeah,
already behind the eight ball. You need to get the human in the loop up front, and then if you need to be able to empower that human in the loop to push back on the machine or to improve the machine, because just like anything, whether it's a formula or a report, anything can be improved, but you need to be empowering. Some companies have, I think, that create or make it very hard for you to interrogate the machine without going through multiple different levels of approval. And sometimes not retaliation,
yeah,
but sometimes somebody might be perceiving that as, well, you're negative. You don't want to actually use with you're not wanting to get in with the times, or you don't want, and it's not that. Sometimes the person that is doing, that's what I was going to say when we got slightly disconnected, that I think what I saw in manufacturing was the people who know best about anything inside of a production floor are the people who are in the front of the line. Those people are doing the
yeah,
job day in and day out. And that's what lean unlocks. That's what lean understood, that when you're
yeah,
doing that Gemba walk, you're going through and asking the operator what are things that they could do better. And they would have much better ideas than any engineer would. Same thing applies here. You want to have the human in the loop, um,
yeah.
ensuring that you are improving the overall process.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the progression of, start with your personal productivity, then look at workflows across your team, and then you can look at departmental efficiencies and then cross-functional, sort of collaboration and efficiencies, and then all the way to the enterprise. And I think there's lots of what I like to call like organizational antibodies that you have to get through as you go through each and every layer of this to all the way through to the enterprise piece. And I think that's also the challenge in front of us. I think to see the full scale of the impact, we have to get through the human pieces. And one of the best ways to do that, I do think, is to keep the human in the loop, as you've said. Oscar,
Yeah.
it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
No, it's been a joy. It is a topic that I'm very, very passionate about. I am looking forward to hearing more about what other leaders are doing inside of the machine and how they're utilizing the machine. Um,
Yeah.
I follow. Luckily now we don't have any shortage of data, right? And in the end, for me, I'm an
Yeah.
operator, so I care about the speed, the clarity, the accountability, how to make better decisions. So I would love to stay in touch and then learn more about the what other leaders are actually doing, because a lot of times that's
Yeah.
when you also start challenging yourself. A lot of times
Hmm.
I find myself doing things with the machine where I'm still like, I'm doing something that could be somehow automated, but I'm still there because I want to be in the loop kind of deal. But it's like, well, are
Yeah.
you in the loop because you don't trust the machine? What can you do to trust the machine? So how can you build the
Yeah.
checkpoints? So whatever you're doing can be codified. And that is a terrifying thing. But I feel that it's up to the leader to ensure that the team feels safe, but also if
Yeah.
that the teams feel this is here and it's here to stay and it's going to transform and it's going to create either industries or jobs that don't exist today. So one
Yeah.
thing that I told my team a few months ago, I said, look, if you still have 10 to 15 years in your tank, you have to be AI, not native, but at least AI knowledgeable, because otherwise you're going to
Yeah.
start falling behind. And you have seen this over the last 100 years. Every piece
Yeah.
of technology creates and destroys. It creates more than it destroys, because otherwise the economy would have not grown. But there's one thing that you have to do while you're going, when you're immersed in that change. You have to adapt.
Yeah.
There was a person in a conference last week that said something that really blew my socks. It's not new, it's actually an old expression, but it resonated with me because it connects back to what we're talking today, Yosha.
Hmm.
If you don't like change, you're going to hate extinction. If you don't like
Yeah.
change, you're going to hate extinction.
Yeah.
That was like, that sums it up
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. I definitely think this is a very specific moment and everyone has to find their own way around it. But I do think this is something that's gonna affect all of us and we have to find our place in it for sure.
Yep. Yep. Thank you so much for your time and for all the questions. I've enjoyed this conversation thoroughly.
Likewise, me too. Thank you, Oscar.
Thank you.